URL. So this is the JavaScript object. So on that JavaScript object, which I'm going to bind, it's going to have a property called image URL. It's going to bind that to the source of this particular image. So again, this is all happening magically on that process all function. It's just magically binding this stuff up together. This one here, I've got a div, and I've attached the text content to the title element, which I'm going to throw at this template. And you can do very complex things, like you can even win-bind CSS properties like background image. And we can even use converters. So this is a converter, which just happens to be a JavaScript function. It's really, the binding's quite robust, and you can do lots with it, and it's improved a lot in 8.1 as well. So let's have a look at this is the item template, which is in the default, the default project. I'm going to delete that. Well, I'm actually, you can see all these different things where it says this is the binding that's happening automatically there. You see I'm using a win control of win.js.binding.template at the top. So I'm just going to add my own. So this is my template. I'm going to rename it item template, which is what you might have noticed a spelling mistake there. That's going to come back and haunt us in a moment. So I've changed the item template. I've put in my own little sort of binding HTML. I've got an inner container, and then I've got an image class. So what I'm going to do is go into the section, CSS, and I'm just going to add some CSS, which is going to style those two elements in my template as well. So I've got an item container template, which makes it 250 pixels by 250 pixels. And then my item image, which is on grid row 1. And then my item title, which is on grid row 2. I'm using the Microsoft Grid layout system here to to lay out my elements on the grid. And then when I play this, what's going to happen is you're actually going to get... Oh, you're actually going to get... It's beautiful. It's actually broken. This is what you'd get if there was no template, just raw JSON. And the reason it's broken is because I made a typo in the class. I need to change that to item template, not template. And I start that up, and now it should use this new item template for each individual item. Boom. So now I've got images from Flickr of Basel. Well, some of them are, some of them aren't. That's Flickr for you. But you can call, any API. You can bind it to a UI. It's really very straightforward. Probably far more straightforward than I made it look. Now, what happens when we click on one of those items? I want to, show a bigger image. So I'm just going to go back to this element, which at the start I uncommented a lot of things. So I'm going to put that one, item.invoked, add this handler back in. And what that's going to do is when a user clicks on an element, it's going to click this function, item invoked. And the item invoked is then going to do something, which it's going to go and take the JavaScript object and it's going to pass it to another page and then navigate to that page. What I'm doing is I'm just removing some of their code and adding some of mine. But fundamentally, I'm taking the object, which they selected, and I'm passing it to the item.html page. And I'm using win.js navigation to then navigate to that page. And it will pass that object as a parameter. And then on the ready function of the item page, I can then go and pick out the item that I've passed over. Now, I don't need to resolve the item because I'm actually passing it in raw. So item options.item. And then I've got my element set to this item.title here. So what should happen is when I click on the element, it's going to invoke the handler, it's going to pass the object, and then the title is going to be printed and bound to my HTML control. What I want to show, obviously, is the actual image. So I'm going to add an image on this item page as well. So I'm going to switch over to item.html, and I'm going to grab go to the content section and put an image. just going to leave it blank. I'm going to give it an ID so that I can actually go and speak to it somehow from the code behind. So I'll call it Flickr image. And then in the JavaScript code behind, underneath that line where I set the title, I'm going to use a different syntax. I'm just going to say document.getElement by ID. I'm going to get that element by ID, Flickr image, dot source equals, and then I'm going to pass in what I believe is the property which is coming across, which is item.url. I think that's what the name that Flickr use in the JSON feed that they give me back, so item.url. So if I go to the photo section, and I click on a photo, the photo's not showing up. What's probably happened there is that I've not used the correct property name. So what I do is I put a breakpoint in there. You can, of course, breakpoint and debug JavaScript. And you'll see URL's undefined. So if I look into the item, I'll see actually that the property is called image URL. Image URL. So now I've wired that up using debugging and a little help from the debugger. I'll restart this application. I've left the breakpoint in there, so it will break again. Click on Photos, click on the section. It goes and hits that breakpoint. I'll undo that for the moment. Press play. And now we have the picture showing up as well. So as I click through these different images, it's showing me the larger picture. Which is good. I got a little bit click happy when I was recording this. But wouldn't it be cool if we could add search? Now, search has changed a lot in Windows 8.1. If you used Windows 8, you'll know that you used to click the search charm in any application, and it would, you'd then be able to search your application. Sadly, turns out no one ever found the search charm in an application. So the UI designers changed that and asked all app developers now to do what they probably should have asked them to do in the first place, which is add the search bar into the application. So we're going to add a search bar into the application to our UI. Now, the place I'm going to start in this is using blend, and it's a control. So I go to my assets inside of blend. And I search for search. And you see a search box control, which I'm going to drop on the page. I'm going to actually drop it in the live DOM. You'll see it pop up on the top left-hand corner there. And now I'm going to just set its positioning up a little bit using CSS properties. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to change its grid property, so where it sits in the grid. So there's a MS Grid underlying this whole application. So I'm going to put it in the third column, so it moves over into the third column. And I'm going to align it center, or N, sorry, because it's the row. And then I'm going to align the row center, so it comes down into center. So now it's in the nice place, but I need to then add a little bit of a margin. So I'm going to use that syntax again. I'm going to margin colon, margin hyphen left, right, colon, 20 pixels. And it's going to add a little margin now there. Now I could have just gone and typed that into the margin box, but it's quite nice that you can set these properties like that. I'm going to just give the search box a name, an ID, and I do that by selecting it and then just giving it an ID. And you'll see in the actual live HTML that the ID has just been added, just there. Search box. So now I've got my search UI done. Now I've got to wire it up with my JavaScript application. 4 lines of code. To do some wiring up, I'm going to go back into Visual Studio. And inside of section.js, so the sections piece, I'm going to, this is where I do the search Flickr currently. I'm going to put a variable, search box. I'm going to grab the document, .getElementID. I actually made a typo earlier. You might not have noticed, but I spelled search wrong. So I'm going to spell it wrong when I get element by ID as well. Put a win control, .win control, so it knows it's a Windows control. And now I've got that Windows control. Now I can add, I can control that control by using its property. So I'll say search box dot. I'm going to switch off its search history. So I don't want previous searches to appear in its search history. If you put that to false, it would show it. And then I'm going to then attach when the query, so when the user presses enter or presses the search button, on query submitted of that search box control. And I'm just going to call it an anonymous function. You might do this a little bit differently if it was a real application. And this anonymous function is just then going to do exactly what my search flicker section did, which is going to call search flicker. And then I'm going to pass over the first parameter, which is, well, I want everything to be, even if they're searching, I still want it to be related to Basel. Why did I say that? Basel plus, and then I'm going to pass in the event detail, so the actual thing that they searched, event object.detail dot query text. So that's the piece of text that they added into the box, which it's passing over. And I'm going to pass over the list view. So this is going to just take that query, it's going to then bind it to the list view, and we should be, when I run this. Now, if I go into Photos, I've got the search box. Click on the search box, type in church, and now it's searching church in Basel. Train. It's loading them very ugly in a way there. It's kind of slightly ugly because it's loading those off the wire, off the internet. There's lots of things that you can do to improve those kinds of things. We could add some nice CSS effects and animations to it so it doesn't load perhaps until the actual whole of the image is loaded up. But fundamentally, that's how you build a very basic HTML and JavaScript application for Basel. Next. The only other thing which I really wanted to mention was the app manifest. So this is slightly unusual and something you wouldn't have to do in a HTML and JavaScript website. But we want to, let's say we wanted to add a geolocation to our application. So rather than just searching Basel there, perhaps it could change the application if I was in Germany or France or the States. It would show me their travel information and so forth. Well, to do that, I would probably want to use the geolocator, right? So I want to use the geolocation syntax. Well, by default, if you try and use the geolocation API without making any requests, it's going to fail. What you do in the app manifest is you can actually set up and say, I'm saying I'm going to allow geolocation in this application. I'm going to try and use it. Now, if you don't put it in the app manifest, then when you try and use it, it's going to debug and fall over. It's important when you're ever using things like geolocation, the file system, that you put it into the app manifest, and which is just a project file. It's an XML project file. And in Visual Studio, you actually have a nice GUI editor, so you can change all this stuff. And also, you put into your app manifest things like the tile that it uses when it puts on the Windows 8 start screen. And you set all kinds of different properties for your application. And all of these properties are really for the store. It's telling the store, my application is going to use geolocation, my application is going to use the file system, so that when the application is actually in the store, users are upfront warned that this application is going to require geolocation. It's going to require all these various things. It also means that we can, when you're doing the store, the tile which appears in the store is also declared inside of this manifest as well. So your app manifest is really crucial for your application as well. Once you've got your application, we would right-click, build, and it will create what we call an appx file, which is just fundamentally a zip file which contains all of your application. This zip file, you then go to your dev portal, your Windows dev portal, and you would upload this to the store. And it will ask you for things like the name of the application. The name has to be unique, not just in your market, but everywhere in the Windows Store. It's going to ask you for a description. It's going to ask you potentially for some marketing information about your application, because you're now marketing your application. It's going to ask you for the actual file, the appx file, and you're going to upload that. Important to remember that to actually become a Windows 8 application developer, we've recently announced that if you're a Windows Phone developer, then you will get Windows 8 Store developer account for free. And if you're not, if you're neither, and the other way, it works the other way. If you're a Windows 8 application developer, you can be a Windows Phone developer for free as well. And I think in the UK, it's £19 now. So it was much more expensive. It's about £35. So it would be the same in this country as well. Well, they'll have, it's kind of a more nominal fee. But there is a fee to pay to actually submit your application to the store. You then choose which applications, which markets you want to put your app in. There are over 200 applications where you could put it in. For the most part, that's really simple, but you have to be cognizant if you're putting it into certain countries which have strict religious views, and your application, as one of my partners was lots of women in bikinis, trying to put it out to a Middle Eastern country. They got refused, because we will respect the various cultures of the different countries. So it might always be better if you just select the countries that you want to publish to, rather than just doing this, I'll go everywhere. Because then you can really consider the sort of sometimes very, very things that you wouldn't think about culturally, which sometimes crop up. So you put it in the store, you publish it. It then takes around, it will ask you for lots of different information. It takes about 5 days. I think we have a 5-day SLA between it going into the store, some engineer in Switzerland somewhere picking it up, running it on their application. They test the application. They make sure it does what you say it does. They make sure it passes our certain quality bar, and then they put it into the store. Now, I don't know what it's like in this country, but in the UK, we have a 5-day SLA, but they do it in a day. So generally, I've never had an application take longer than a day for me to submit it and to actually go live in the store. It's very, very quick. And it will then show up in the store to be purchased, as you would expect in the Windows Store. And the Windows Store has been redesigned in Windows 8.1 to be a lot more user-friendly and to encourage people to search and to discover stuff. They've actually used Bing's search algorithms directly into the Windows Store now, which make it a lot more relevant and make sure that the searching is a lot more relevant, and the apps are recommended to you, which are much more relevant as well. So with that was a whistle-stop tour of Win.js. I'm going to be in this room again after the break, talking about HTML. So not about Windows 8, but just about HTML5 in general. I hope that was useful in some respects, and I'll see you again next year. Thank you very much.